Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of the 700 Club. If I could take you back in history, it was September of 1961, and a hurricane named Esther was aiming right at us, and it was going to destroy the fledgling CBN. It was going to tear down our tower, destroy the studio, and essentially take us out of business. And in desperation, a group that I was in, going to a meeting in an old hotel in the Monticello called the Full Gospel Businessmen. And we pointed our hand at Esther, and in the name of Jesus, commanded it to go back where it came from. And like a big, dumb beast, that hurricane answered that prayer. And since that time, God has put a shield over this area where we live. It's been remarkable, just absolutely remarkable. Well, right now, Virginia, Southern Virginia, and North Carolina and South Carolina are being threatened by what may be a Category 4 hurricane named Florence. It's only a 1 now, but it'll build to a 4. And they think that it may dump as many as 20 inches on this area,
which would cause massive flooding. Well, forecasters say that after Florence makes landfall, it could sit for days and bring both torrential rains and the floods that are feared by so many. Ephraim Graham has more from the CBN Newsroom.
Hurricane Florence poses a serious threat as it barrels toward the East Coast. The National Hurricane Center forecast it will be a Category 4 or 5 storm when it makes landfall Thursday. Now about 600 miles south of Bermuda, it is quickly gaining strength as it moves toward the U.S. The eye of the storm is expected to fall on Wilmington, North Carolina. Winds could reach upwards of 150 miles an hour with catastrophic flooding. People in coastal communities are taking all precautions.
We're just going to do everything we can here to get everything as secure as possible, and then you give your ass to God and see what happens.
States of emergency have been declared in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. Joe Bastardi, chief forecaster for Weather Bell Analytics, tells CBN News the worst impact could come days after the storm hits.
Storm comparable in intensity at landfall to Hugo and Hazel. Those are the benchmark storms on the Carolina coastline, strong Category 4 hurricanes. But the difference with this is it's not going to move fast. It's going to go inland, sit over the southern Appalachians, and lead to 3 to 4 feet of rain in parts of South Carolina, North Carolina, perhaps even into Southwest Virginia. So when this is all said and done, this is probably going to be the costliest storm in the history of the Carolinas, because not only are you dealing with a major hurricane hit, but you're dealing with flooding of biblical proportions.
And Pat, for those living here on the East Coast, now is the time to be making preparation.
What I'm telling people to do, we're going to be having a prayer meeting here earlier. This is the week of prayer, and we're going to believe God to send the wind to push that storm Florence out into the ocean where it won't hurt anybody. And the people in North Carolina pray, South Carolina pray, and Southern Virginia, where we live here in Tidewater, pray, because we want that thing to go away. We don't want to have, that they say when a Category 4 storm hits land, the land subsequently will be uninhabitable. They are the words that are being used. The power goes out for some weeks later, and as Joe Bastardi was talking about, the flooding is going to be, quote, of biblical proportions. We don't want that. So please pray. We'll all pray together, and we'll believe God for a miracle to turn that storm back into the Atlantic where it won't harm any people. Ephraim.
To that we say amen. Turning now to a coming storm overseas, Iran is making plans to restart its nuclear program, announcing Sunday it has the facilities to start building more centrifuges. Growing tension between the United States and Iran could be leading to a showdown. As CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell reports, economic sanctions are putting heavy pressure on the Islamic regime.
President Trump says Iran is on the ropes.
If you look at Iran, the first day that I got to office, or let's look at it differently, a day before I got to office, everybody was saying Iran would be taking over the Middle East. It was just a question of when. Now they're just looking to survive.
For months, demonstrators on the streets of Tehran and other cities have defied the regime. Protesters blame their leaders for the crumbling economy by spending Iran's treasure on foreign wars throughout the Middle East. Iran's currency is plummeting and reached its lowest rate on record.
There is no glimmering of hope that the situation changes. Up to now, seen no kind of practical and effective way of the practical solution on behalf of the government to solve this problem.
It's part of the administration's plan.
If I get the logic of it, and I think there is a logic to it, is that through economic sanctions that then produce internal unrest and therefore pressure on the regime has to start thinking twice about its ability to maintain these far-flung commitments across the region.
The U.S. fanned the flames by pulling out of the Iranian nuclear deal, reimposing sanctions, and there's more to come.
Remember that in November we have the beginnings of oil sanctions on Iran, the intention to end Iran's ability to export oil. It's been a very major new blow. So we're just at the beginning of this to a certain degree, the beginning of real Western pressure on Iran.
Iran's President Rouhani promises further defiance.
We will continue by all means to produce and export our oil. Oil is in the front line of confrontation.
Iran also warned it could shut down the Straits of Hormuz, through which much of the world's oil passes. Another front line is this ongoing war in Israel's regular air assault on Iran's growing military presence inside Syria. The IDF says it has hit more than 200 Iranian targets in the past 2 years.
So there's a whole bunch of potential tools in the box, so to speak, to continue to put pressure on the regime, economic, political, and military. And I think what we're going to be seeing in the months ahead is an increasing usage of those and an increasingly coordinated usage of those to try to roll back Iran across the region.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Pressure building. Pat?
I really think, our previous Secretary of State said we don't go for regime change. Well, in that case, we really do. Those mullahs have exercised a dictatorship over Iran. The Iranian people are good people, and they love freedom, and they're restive under this terrible regime. We need to take them out. Now, I'll tell you how we can do that. I remember the Israeli ambassador to Iran, who became a good friend, who said, look, those college students over there and the workers, the labor unions, they want freedom. And we need to help them. They may need some supplies. They may need some weapons. But we shouldn't in any way be reluctant to supply covertly or otherwise the necessary equipment to overturn that regime that is such a dictatorship and has been so, so aggressive and without question saying our goal is to destroy Israel. And they blame the United States and call us the great Satan. Well, it's time we turn around and say, all right, the great Satan is going to do one better on you. But I think it's time to do it, and I think we've got a president who's willing to take that kind of action. And another action he's taken, Ephraim is going to tell us about.
Pat, the Trump administration plans to close the Palestinian Liberation Organization's offices in Washington, D.C. The Wall Street Journal reports National Security Advisor John Bolton is expected to make the announcement today. The administration says Palestinians refuse to take meaningful steps to negotiate peace with Israel. Palestinians condemn the move, calling it, quote, reckless escalation. Last week, the U.S. moved to end funding for a UN program giving aid to Palestinian refugees. The administration says the funds are not being used in the best interest of the United States. North Korea staged a huge military parade Sunday to mark its 70th anniversary as a nation, but it held back its most advanced missiles. In the past, North Korea has rolled out its collection of ICBMs in a show of military strength. This year, instead of a focus on the country's advanced military hardware, nearly half of the celebration was devoted to civilian efforts to build the domestic economy. President Donald Trump tweeted, "This is a big and very positive statement from North Korea." The midterm elections are less than 60 days away, with control of the House at stake. Both sides are rolling out the biggest voices in their parties to sway voters. CBN Washington reporter Amber Strong looks at how the battle for the ballot may come down to the president and his predecessor.
two presidents.
If it does happen, it's your fault because you didn't go out to vote.
We have a chance to restore some sanity in our politics.
Both on the campaign trail, neither on the ballot. Former President Barack Obama breaking his silence and tradition to publicly criticize the sitting president.
It did not start with Donald Trump. He is a symptom, not the cause.
Former President Barack Obama hitting the campaign trail in California on behalf of a handful of Democratic hopefuls. Vice President Pence expressed his disdain for the former president's decision.
It was very disappointing to see President Obama break with the tradition of former presidents and become so political. The American people in 2016 rejected the policy and direction of Barack Obama.
But members of the Democratic Party say desperate times call for desperate measures.
Because of the ways in which President Trump over the last 18 months has challenged, has broken some of our longstanding traditions about respect for the rule of law, the independence of the judiciary, the independent media, that he felt compelled to speak out at this point.
Some of those issues are brought front and center in a New York Times op-ed, where a senior member of the administration claims they are working against the president's agenda and his, quote, misguided impulses. Fallout over the identity of the anonymous author gave way to several administration officials lining up to say, it wasn't me.
Should all top officials take a lie detector test, and would you agree to take one?
I would agree to take it in a heartbeat.
UN Ambassador Nikki Haley condemned the writer in her own op-ed. By throwing gas on a fire of endless distraction, the author and the frenzied media reaction to the op-ed have hurt all of us trying to do our jobs for the country, Haley wrote. Now, supporters of the president say this is just one more distraction from some of the positive news coming out of the White House, like a booming economy and the likely confirmation of a second Supreme Court justice. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
Campaign trail heating up. Pat?
Thanks. You know, I hate to say that President Obama is a narcissist of the first order. And he says, I, over and over again, talking about himself. I think if he had set out to destroy America, if that was his design, he couldn't have done a better job in the policies he put in place. They have destroyed the ability of this great nation to move forward. And under the policies of the President Trump, the taxes have been lowered, the regulations have been eased, business has been unshackled. It's been a boom in the stock market and the labor market. The unemployment rate has hit historic lows, and there is no way that we can get away with listening to that president say, well, I wouldn't have my Justice Department involved in politics. Oh, really? Loretta Lynch didn't meet with President Clinton to try to help his wife's campaign. He didn't spend time in a plane on the tarmac talking about that. Your previous Attorney General didn't get involved in politics. You sure? And you never told a lie when you said if you like your plan, you can keep it. When you lied bald-facedly to the American people repeatedly about Obamacare, and we've got to sit there and listen to that. And I guess people are so gullible that they'll take any lie. But this is a past president. I mean, he is an incredible practitioner of the art of prevarication. I think that's a nice way of saying it. All right.